Welcome to Aspire, the podcast from Cavendish and Unchained, where we talk about all things property related to Cheshire and North Wales. David Adams once again joined me, Simon Leadbetter, to talk about the property market and a little thing that might have happened recently, which is called a budget. So we had a budget.
We did.
Now, there was a lot of build up to this budget, possibly more build up than we usually get with any fiscal event. And actually, looking back, generally it's been described as benign compared with some of the feared alternatives. From where you sit as an estate and letting agents business, advising landlords and homeowners daily, did this strike you as a reassuring budget? Or was this simply the calm before the next round of reforms, tax rises, and all the other negative stuff that we were predicting?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question. I think something that's interesting with this budget is the actual lead up to it seemed to have gone forever, didn't it? Because it was announced in sort of late August, I think, from memory. So we've had quite a few months of speculation. There's been so much stuff in the press, very negative stuff, perhaps as well. That's almost scaremongering, and the government have seen the reaction to that. I would think, and I think it's always the case. It's never as bad as it's sort of billed to be, is it? So yeah, the main change we've had has been the mansion tax and obviously the additional tax for landlords as well. At the end of the day, go on. Sorry.
No, I think what your answer's kind of giving is actually, it was an event, but it was a bit of a damp squib. I know we'll get. You mentioned things. I want to get into each of the things that did happen in turn.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Overall, it was kind of like a meh.
Well, yeah. So all of the sales team at Cavendish, we were watching it live on the TV, and I think at the end of it, I think one of us said, "Oh, is that it? What happened to all the things that were going to happen?" I mean, we were predicting we'd have a seller's tax,
Yeah.
all sorts of things, a reform to the council tax system, and the reality is that none of that happened. There have been a few changes, which we'll obviously talk about. But actually, I think at the moment, we've had November, so we're recording this on the 1st of December, but our November figures at Cavendish were pretty much average compared to the last few years. In fact, we had a busier November this year than we did last year. So on the ground, it just feels like a normal November market, to be honest. Obviously, we're now only 3 or 4 weeks away from Christmas. People still need to move. So
and actually, if you want to move before some of the tax changes do come in, I know some of them are happening in 28 and 27, all that kind of stuff. But with the time it takes to actually get a completion, if you want to get out before the end of this financial year, the beginning of the next, instruct early, because it
absolutely
takes that amount of time. That's 4 months. That's tight. In reality, 4 months is tight.
Yeah.
Not because anything the agents are doing. It's just it takes time with conveyancing and all this stuff that goes on. So I think you've made a point there, which I think is a really point that people should get from this is the best time to instruct is when you need to sell or buy a new house. So whatever's going on in the macroeconomic environment, we had a lady called Kate Faulkner OBE, who's a fantastic speaker about the whole property industry. And she makes a point very clearly. There is no property market.
No.
There is a market for a property. And that's what good agents do, don't they? Whether they're to let or to sell, they are the market that the agent will create for it.
Yeah. And I think we said this on last month's podcast that, almost there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of little micro markets, going down to cities, towns, streets, postcodes. If you need to sell a property, rent a property, buy a property, it's don't try and time the market is our advice. Just like you said, the best time to sell a house is when you want to sell a house, basically. Yeah. It sounds too simple, doesn't it?
Exactly. And all the markets moving at a similar time, or the market doesn't exist. So actually, if your houses are going up, other houses are going up. Your houses are kind of staying flat, other houses are staying flat.
It's all relative.
Everything's relative. That's what I was looking for. So let's talk about this mansion tax.
Yes.
It actually affects a tiny proportion of homes nationally. I don't think people realize how tiny the proportion is, but a far more material slice in the premium market, obviously. Um, let's get some stats. In the last year,
Yeah.
in Cheshire and North Wales, there were 29,328 instructions and 60 above 2 million. And in
Yeah.
terms of properties that actually exchanged, there were 16,623 and 13 of them were above 2 million. That's 0.08%.
Yeah.
How do you expect this annual surcharge to reshape behavior at the top end? Is this a gentle nudge towards mobility or a drag on transactions as owners choose to sit tight?
I so this doesn't come into to force until 2028, does it?
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, if we go back a few years to when the stamp duty, the 250 mark, was the stamp duty cut off, and there were lots of properties that, well, basically properties that there was a lack of properties selling between 250 and sort of 280, 290, 300 because no one wanted to pay between 250 and 260 because suddenly they pay a load of tax. Um, are we going to see that again? I'm not sure. So obviously, the top end of the market behaves very differently, to that of the 250 market. Um, Something that I find interesting, and I think it is going to be interesting to see how they do this, is how are they actually going to measure this, police it? For example, there's probably a massive amount of properties that are worth 2 million or above that aren't even registered.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, so those stats you just gave us. So we're talking 0.2% of the market in Cheshire and North Wales that's transacted in the last 12 months has been 2 million or above, hasn't it?
Yes.
But what about all the properties that aren't on the market?
Absolutely. I think, you mentioned that I think the 2028 is quite a critical. This is 1 year before the next election.
Yeah,
And it does feel like this is and I'm not getting into the politics. However you feel about the politics, I have no views on that. It's just what this actually could be. Is this is quite a vote pleasing measure amongst backbench Labour and the public as a whole. People actually do support some sort of tax on the wealthiest people, additional tax. Whether
yeah,
that works or not from an economic sense, the point is it's actually quite a popular move. It also gives them time to see what's happening with the economy and reverse it in 3 years' time. So
well,
it
yeah,
it might never come to pass. And in the
no,
scheme of things, we talked about this before we started recording, and you said it, and I think it's a really important point. At this level, there is no price for the property other than what people will pay. At 2 million, £250,000, there's probably quite a lot of similar 250,000. It's a pyramid of properties, isn't it? It's kind of
mm,
like, a narrow at the top, which are worth a lot, and a lot at the bottom that aren't worth as much. So there's a lot of competition in that lower end of the market. At the higher end, if you're trying to find one of the 60 properties of 29,000 properties that are £2 million, then you might, if you want that property, you will pay a premium for it. And this kind of tax is going to be a very marginal sum of the actual value of the property. I think that's kind of
yeah,
the theory.
yeah, and I think what we don't want is almost homeowners to sort of undersell their property or sort of devalue their property, to avoid paying, this extra stamp duty. This extra council tax, which in reality we're probably talking around £200 extra a month. But so which
And at that level, if the range of prices is plus or minus 3% on the value of a property at £2 million,
mm,
that's an extra plus or minus £60,000. I mean,
yeah,
this is not a large amount of money relative to that.
no,
So yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think it was a little bit of a crowd pleasing measure. I'm not sure it'll ever see the light of day for the technical problems you describe.
mm,
You know, they can't use the council bans from 1991. You'd think,
no,
and it does disproportionately affect parts of central London, which is again interesting. So
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I just feel it was kind of like it was sort of noise. The fact it was from 20, if it came in at midnight, you go right, they mean it. 2028,
yeah,
a
and
lot
we
to happen in the next 3 years, 2 years.
Absolutely. And we put out a social media post and actually sent an email out to our database last week with a really interesting heat map of the
Mhm.
whole of the UK.
Yeah,
It basically
sorry,
showed properties that
brilliant.
were worth £2 million or more. And where we sit in Cheshire and North East Wales, there's not that many properties. Obviously, there's a load of properties in London and the South East. But is it going to affect a lot of people local to where we are? Not so much.
Yeah, and I think I mean, if there is someone out there, if you're one of the 60 who has one of those £2 million houses, get a good agent who can build a market around your property.
Absolutely.
There isn't a property market. There is a market for a property. I mean, that's the key thing to take in mind, and that's
Absolutely.
why you want a good agent with a respectable name to list
Yeah.
your property.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's go to the other side of the relationship, the landlords who are taking a little bit of a hammering at the moment.
Again,
I know. So they're going to face yet another tax increase from 2027.
I know.
It's a 2% rise across all income bands, which sounds marginal. Yet, we've had Section 24, higher stamp duty, compliance requirements, and rising mortgage costs. Do you think we're at a tipping point where smaller landlords start to exit in meaningful numbers? And if so, if that is actually happening, what would that do to rents?
Well, George, so there's so much I can talk about on this. So
You have the conch.
I do. So obviously in the budget, in all the speculation, to the budget, they were talking about bringing in national insurance for landlords on rents, which obviously would be higher than 2%. So obviously, if you had to pick one, um, this doesn't seem as bad as that. Although, nobody likes paying more tax, do they? I think this will affect your private accidental landlords more than it will perhaps your sort of more modern, newer sort of portfolio landlords, who've perhaps got their property in sorry, their portfolio in a limited company. Um, I think the long and short of this is if landlords have got to pay 2% more, then that will only get passed on to tenants. I think landlords are now at a point where any new bit of legislation, any new additional cost, they are, quite a lot of landlords are at a point where they can't take that on anymore. The way I like to look at it is if you're a landlord, the way you need to think is like a business owner and actually, think about, you're running a business, whether you've got one property or 200 properties, and your rent is your income, and then you've got all of your expenditure as well. And I think over the last 5, 10 years, we've seen more and more compliance come in, and obviously, there's been more cost. Contractors charge more money. Letting agents have had to charge more money as well. There's been more tax to pay. There's more and more expenditure, and yet what we see is there's so many landlords out there who are scared of putting the rent up. So actually, what happens is your income stays the same, and your expenditure keeps on going up. So actually, now a lot of landlords aren't making any money, um, apart from the capital growth. So,
Now, if only someone had written a book on this.
well, funnily enough, the Landlord's Playbook available on Amazon. Shameless plug. So I wrote about this in my book, funnily enough. Hence why I speak so passionately about it. Something I'm really passionate about is that profit shouldn't be a dirty word, and that landlords need to make a profit because if a landlord isn't making money, and let's say they're losing money, they've got a mortgage to pay, worst case scenario, that property could be repossessed, and the tenant isn't going to thank my landlord for that. So my advice to landlords is, with regards to rent increases, little and often. You don't have to be putting your rent up, to exactly, to market rate or over market rate. That's not what we'd advise. But little and often there has to be a rent increase. And what I think we'll find is that landlords, that this will affect tenants because landlords will be looking at their letting agents if they're managed by agents, or they'll be looking at their rent roll going, right, well, we haven't increased the rent for 5 years. We're going to have to pay 2% more tax in 18 months' time. I'm afraid, Mr. Tenant, we are going to have to put your rent up.
And I think the whole debate is damaged by the whole landlord versus tenant. I think
Absolutely.
the whole nature of that debate, again, the aforementioned Kate Faulkner talks to landlords aren't the enemy. They essentially stepped into a breach that wasn't being filled by government of providing social housing and affordable housing at the lower end, and they created it. Of course, there's all sorts of moral and ethical questions about the landlord renting set, and I get that, but that's
Yeah.
not the point. That's a bigger decision for the country. The country's decided this is where we want to go with the private rental sector, but it's not landlord versus tenant. A conversation, ideally through a letting agent, that says, look, rents will increase. I like the point about not at market rate. You've got a good tenant, you want to keep them. A void period
Absolutely.
is a disaster for a landlord because
That's
you're
the
earning
worst thing
nothing.
that can happen. Yeah.
But you don't have to. I mean, I actually rented for a while before we bought the place we're in while we're looking for a place. And we actually ended up staying there longer than we thought. And we knew what the landlord could charge on the market for that property. But we were great tenants.
Yeah.
A family of four, professional, treated the house as their own. Far better to keep us in that house for as long as possible. Actually, we saw the property go on the market to let. It's like, look what we could have been paying
Yeah,
if they
absolutely.
wanted to. So I think that's the good way. If you have a positive relationship with your tenant and your tenant is good, then yeah, keep them in the house, avoid void periods, let them treat the property as own, and keep, but treat it like a business
Absolutely. Absolutely. Landlords need to have a business owner mindset.
because they do own a business. It is a business, and they should
Absolutely.
explore. They should explore how they can make it more a business. Putting property into businesses is actually quite a sensible thing to do. Um,
Yeah.
oh,
And yeah.
go,
So do you
you
know
go.
what? So on
You're
this,
the
so
expert. You're the expert. It's just I wax lyric about this because I'm very passionate about it too, and I think
no, I know.
we
I
need
know
to
I am.
help people because I think you're right. Accidental landlords don't know about this stuff,
No.
and
So do you know what? So I wasn't going to do this, but for anyone that's listening to this, that's a landlord, whether you're watching this or listening to it, if you find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, email me. My email address is david.adams@cavmail.co.uk, cavmail.co.uk. If you email me or find me on LinkedIn, message me. If you if you reference the fact that you've listened to this podcast, I will send you a copy of the Landlord's Playbook for free in the post. Just give me your home address or wherever you'd like me to send it, because I really landlords need to understand this, that you are running a business, and if you adopt a business owner's mindset, that's where it starts. That's where it starts, and things will transform overnight because you've got to be thinking of this like a business. So if anyone wants a copy of the Landlord's Playbook, message me. I'll send you a copy for free, no questions asked.
that's a very nice
How's
secret.
that? It's Christmas, isn't it?
That's
Yeah,
a really nice secret Santa on the 1st of December. I love
yeah,
it.
there you go.
When this goes out in early December, that's absolutely fantastic. Okay, let's move forward because I'm conscious of everyone's time and we want to make this like a listenable length. Is planning reform and the 1.5 million homes ambition were positioned at the budget strategic centre. Do you buy the argument that a 40-year high in house building is feasible? Or are we all being invited to believe in a supply miracle that relies on a planning system already stretched way beyond breaking point?
I mean, it does seem a bit ambitious, doesn't it? I think obviously when Labour got into power last year, it was is that actually going to happen? It does seem awfully ambitious. Obviously, the short and long of it is we need more homes, and we do have an aging housing stock here in the UK, don't we? And certainly locally, there's a lot of older houses. Now, I recorded the podcast last week actually on our Chester Landlord podcast, a separate podcast to this, with a domestic energy assessor, and we were talking all about this, about older houses, and actually how now there is a big preference to not just buyers but tenants, that they want energy efficient houses to live in. And so modern homes, we sell lots of modern homes at Cavendish. We work with quite a lot of builders, so we've got developments that we're selling at the moment over in Chester. We've got quite a lot in North Wales, in Mold and in Ruthin as well. And they're really popular properties. Got lots of space out here. Got lots of green space in North Wales, and obviously we need to be very, very careful that properties are designed, according to where they are, et cetera, et cetera, without getting very political on this. Um, but we need more homes. I do think the target is extremely ambitious, and I don't think it'll be met personally.
No.
Hopefully I'm wrong, but who knows? But we need more homes, and people like modern new homes. I actually live in a new build. I actually bought a new build last year, and I lived in a Victorian house before that. And it's great.
Whereas I live in a house that was built in the 17th century, and I think I now have electricians, plumbers, and roofers living with me permanently. It's a lot of fun, especially when it rains.
Well, so it's the 1st of December today, and I've only had heating on twice so far. Whereas you have it on it even in the summer, don't you?
Yeah, it never gets too hot too. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
I was saying to my wife before to actually came out. It's like it never gets too hot, never gets too cold. It's never quite warm enough, and that's so. Yeah, we boosted our heating on quite a bit more than we probably should actually during the last few weeks. But I love in a house that was older than Isaac Newton, quite frankly, when I live in Grantham. Okay, so one of the quieter budget lines was the expectation that mortgage rates could drift towards a 5% by 2029. For homeowners and would-be movers, what does a world of persistent higher rates mean for change, confidence, and the kind of homes people feel able to stretch to?
So, interestingly, on mortgage rates, not a lot of people think like this. We've had a real period over the last 5, 6, 7 years of low interest rates. Um, if you look at the average mortgage rate, sorry, the average base rate over the last 100 years, funnily enough, the average, I think off the top of my head, it's about 5.7% or 5.6%. It's sort of mid to late 5%. So actually, at the moment, we're actually in a fairly normal base rate period. Um, Long of the days, of 15%, et cetera, et cetera. It's fairly normal at the moment, but not a lot of the papers won't let you believe that, will they?
No, and no, and actually, I mean, you say 5 years. I think really since the global financial crash, we've been through a 10, 15-year period of where the government's in desperate. Essentially, they've essentially been paying people in the city to borrow money.
Yeah,
No, it's kind of like, we've got used to it, but I remember the 90s, and when not we'd keep our house. I was a young man then. I was in my 20s, but it's like, I'd gone back home after uni, and I was like talking to my mum, and it's like interest rates to 15%. You go,
mm,
okay, we're going to lose the house.
yeah,
And I think it's why you got to get good financial advice. It's why you've not got to stretch yourself too much when you're buying a property,
yeah,
because it changes. Look at the long curve of history, and yeah, but a range of 4.5% to 5.5% is kind of a normal rate. It's actually the sign of a healthy economy as well.
yeah, and that's why they brought in the stress testing, a few years ago, didn't they? That is probably the main reason that the housing market hasn't crashed over the last few years is because of the stress testing that people, when the mortgage rates went up dramatically, 2 or 3 years ago, people could still afford to pay their mortgage. And I actually wrote a LinkedIn article a few weeks ago about this, about that actually affordability is better now than it's ever been. Now again, because of social media, etc., a lot of people wouldn't think that, and obviously there's a lot more things that people like to spend money on now that perhaps many years ago people didn't spend money on because they didn't have any money or they couldn't afford it. So I think perhaps social pressures now make us feel that things are more expensive.
And kind of like, a public service announcement is, if anyone out there is struggling with their mortgage, there is help. You know,
Absolutely.
building
Absolutely.
societies and banks, the last thing they want to do is force someone out of their house. I know they do, and it's awful. And genuinely, I feel nothing but compassion for the people who lose their homes in that way. But
Yeah.
the earlier you talk to your bank or building society, the earlier you get help. They will. I mean, it sounds odd considering they're profit-seeking monsters. They will move heaven and earth to keep you in your house.
Yeah.
But you've
But are
got
we
to
going
talk
to?
to them. You've got to talk to them.
Yeah. I mean, are we going to see a base rate cut this month in December? I mean, that wouldn't that be nice for for the market? I think that would just give another wave of confidence, because now obviously we've had the budget. The budget was last week. Um, Now it's like, okay, let's crack on. And very much, from our inquiries and, sort of, looking at our offices, buyer inquiries coming in, seller inquiries coming in, it very much feels like I said before, with the 1st of December when we're recording this podcast, it feels like it's the 1st of December any year, to be honest. It's very, very normal. If we get a base rate cut, I think that would really fuel the market even further. If we
Well, there's a
don't,
lot.
though, who knows?
There was quite a bit of analysis I saw before the budget. Is there's this pent up demand that's out there, and this is everything. This is every sector. People have been holding back decisions to see what the budget does because there was so much uncertainty. The market wants to move forward. So it's almost like now we've got certainty, the market will move forward across all aspects. So It would be quite nice if we had a base rate. I mean, I'm not
Be
a
nice little
betting
early
man.
Christmas present,
It'd be
wouldn't
an
it?
early Christmas rate if we got a base rate cut, especially for those who are coming to the end of their fixed terms.
Absolutely.
Okay. First time buyers, the blessed first time buyers, received almost nothing new beyond a consultation for 2026. Given
Mm.
that affordability, as you just said, is at its best level in a decade, does the absence of a new support strike you as a missed opportunity, or is this simply the government betting that cooling inflation and supply reforms will do more for affordability than subsidies ever could?
So I'm going to throw a curveball in here, and this isn't clickbait. I actually think that the government should be supporting the the top end of the chain, to be giving more support to the top end of the chain. What person I'm thinking of is your baby boomers who are sat in a massive house. It's only a person on their own. Or they're with their other half there. Rattling around in a 5 or 6 bed house, and there's no incentive for that person to move. Now, yes, obviously they'll be paying at the top of the range council tax, they'll be paying big energy costs, but actually, if they paid off the mortgage many years ago and they're fairly financially secure, there was no incentive for that person to move. And then what if we gave more support to that type of homeowner, then it would incentivize them to move, and then people would move up the chain, and then that would have a knock-on effect on first-time buyers and actually make it easier, make more homes available to buy.
So,
But
I mean, again, that this is no criticism of people at that end of the market,
absolutely not.
but there's sort of and again, this is no criticism. And I've spoken to people of that generation. My parents of that generation. I know lots of people of that generation.
Yeah.
It's a sort of house blocking because you
Mm.
say there's not only there's no incentive, there's nowhere that they would want to move to. They don't want to move now. They're not at the stage in life they just want to move into a retirement home or senior living environment. They still have a number of years of productive life. They just want to, but then,
Yeah.
as you say, rattling around in a 4 bedroom family house, which they know is inefficient for the four of them.
Well,
But where do they move
I
to? Where's the incentive? And you're right. If you
yeah.
unplugged that, the market would start to move again. It's why all these gates and cliff edges in the market are always a disaster because they create artificiality. But if we could help the top
Yeah.
end, the mature end of the market, would help the bottom end.
But that would make sense, wouldn't it? And that's
I see the flaw in our logic.
yeah,
Um,
it's a bit of a
common,
dig there at the government, but
no, it's not. I mean, it's all governments. I mean,
that'd
no
be
governments.
logical,
No,
wouldn't it? And
it isn't political. No government's thought about that really. It's been this government's in charge for just over a year, but the problem goes back decades, really.
yeah. So again, I actually wrote a LinkedIn article about this a few weeks ago. So
Are
if
you
anyone,
suggesting? Are you suggesting people should follow you on LinkedIn?
yeah, so if anyone wants to find me, just go on LinkedIn, search David Adams. It'll come up with me. So I actually write every week. I write an article about the property market locally to here. And an article I wrote, I think it was about 6 weeks ago. It was about this very issue, and I think what I wrote about was they almost need to create and build some really nice posh bungalows.
Hmm.
For the people at the top of the chain, like we say, that would want to move to those type of properties. In gated communities maybe, um, because that would free up housing stock and it would help people further down the chain, and ultimately then help first time buyers.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to find me on LinkedIn, by all means, there's loads of stuff out there that I write about this
And
very
you are
topic.
available on other sites for those who aren't, because LinkedIn is obviously a professional network. Are you available on Facebook and Instagram and all the kind
Yeah,
of stuff?
so again, if anyone wants to find me on Facebook, David Adams on Facebook, and then on Instagram, I'm David Adams Property Expert.
Excellent. So
So yeah, if anyone wants to find
word
me,
there
I've
because
got loads of content out there about the property market.
you're constantly talking about the market. Fantastic. That's actually quite handy to know for people, as well as the numerous number of podcasts you seem to do, which is really, really good. So, okay, finally, because I'm conscious we want to get this in between. How long have we been going on with? We're good. Yes, excellent. This is good timing. Cavendish operates at the real sharp end of homeowner and landlord sentiment. You are in the arena, so to speak.
We
If
are.
you were to offer one piece of pragmatic advice in the wake of this budget, what will you tell a homeowner considering a sale in 2026? And what will you tell a landlord wondering whether to stay in or bow out?
Okay, so homeowner. So if you're not thinking of moving, because there's only a percentage of the population that are either are thinking of moving or actually are moving, um, at any one point. So with regards to mortgage rates, I hear time and time again, there's a lot of people out there who are paying you know, massive rates of 7, 8% because they're waiting um, for mortgage rates to go back to 2%. I don't think that's going to happen this decade.
It's not. It's not. No, it's
Yeah,
not. No,
or
no.
even next decade. Let's
We've
forget another
had
pandemic.
the period of extraordinarily low interest. That period is gone.
Yeah,
We're
there's
now
a lot of people
extraordinarily
paying the
normal.
standard variable rate. This is homeowners and landlords as well. I speak to quite a lot of people. They say, "Oh, we're paying standard variable rate. We're waiting for the rates to go back down." So I think that's bonkers. And I think that my advice to those people would be speak to a mortgage broker and remortgage. There's lots of products out there. We're seeing some really exciting rates out there. Obviously, if we get another base rate cut in December, all those rates will be factored in over the next couple of weeks or so, won't they? So if you're paying, 7%, 8% standard variable rate, speak to a mortgage broker. If you are thinking of selling, again, leading back to what we were talking about before, there's no, don't try and time the market. I see quite a lot of people trying to time the market with Boxing Day, with January the 2nd, etc., etc. I can see your face laughing at this. So Boxing Day. So this is a bit of an urban myth that Boxing Day is the busiest day on Rightmove. Sorry, yes, I'm going to go there. And basically, because Christmas Day is so quiet on Rightmove, and Boxing Day is busier, it's the biggest jump between it's the biggest jump of activity, basically, from Christmas Day to Boxing Day. But people have got this idea that Boxing Day is actually the busiest day on Rightmove. Actually, one of the busiest days is actually the first week of January. So, and again, advice for sellers: if Boxing Day is the really popular day to put your house on the market, which lots of estate agents say it is, therefore lots of properties come on the market on Boxing Day. I get that, but do you want to be pricing? Sorry, do you want to be launching your property in competition or isolation? So, my advice would be actually, funnily enough, if you're thinking of selling pre-Christmas, put your property on the market because there won't be that many properties coming on the market at the same time, and therefore yours will stand out. So don't
Yeah,
follow the trend of putting your property on the market the day that the whole world puts their property on the market because it will get lost.
and there's a certain brand who will remain nameless, and the big one, they seem to essentially relist all their properties at
On
one point
Boxing Day.
and it what it does create is obviously a big kerfuffle all out there.
Yeah,
But you're right, is your individual property doesn't necessarily stand a chance of standing out. And that's kind of what you want to happen. And, I mean, I talked to the guys who did the original press release that got this whole Boxing Day thing started. If in your area, no one's talking about Boxing Day, talk about Boxing Day. Have a point of difference. If everyone's talking about Boxing Day, there's
don't
no
talk about
advantage to it.
it. No.
When they zig, you zag. But the big thing is the long-term decline we see from about October to Christmas Day reverses and changes direction and goes up on Boxing Day. You're right. It's not the biggest day. It's just the day upon which the
Biggest increase, isn't
decline
it?
reverses to a
Yeah,
long and steady climb that goes up and towards March. And it's like, that's the pivot point. And I say to all the estate agents, and this isn't for estate agents, this is for homeowners and landlords, but to all the estate agents I speak to is do what's right for the client. If
absolutely.
if the right thing for the client is they want the property on the market, get it on the market at the best possible time for them because you're the expert.
Yeah,
So if you're
definitely.
talking to agent, David's given a position there, which I think if you're listening, if you buy into what David has said, I personally do, personally, from my experience of the industry. But if you're out there buying, talk to David and his team because they'll do what's best for you based on their expertise in this market. If someone's flogging something, just ask the questions about what is the proof. If they claim it's the biggest day of the year, fact check, it isn't.
Yeah, and again, so thinking about there's a lot of people who perhaps don't put their property on the market until they found something. So this is a quote from our good friend Simon Gates: "Is that all properties are actually on the market? It's only the more motivated ones that have a for sale sign outside or actually put their property on a portal. So
That
if you're a homeowner listening to this or watching this now and you're waiting for that dream property to come on the market, speak to an agent, speak to us because we can create a buyer campaign for you and go and target those properties that aren't on the market and we can do a deal off market. So if you're waiting to find your dream property, don't just look at the ones that are in inverted commas on the market. Let's go and find one for you.
yeah, I've owned three homes. Have I owned three homes? Yes, I've owned three homes. Just thinking about that, have I owned three homes? Yes, I've owned three homes in my home owning life. Sorry, four homes there. I knew I'd get it wrong, but one of them was an inheritance. That's a different matter. But the three homes that I actively bought, one of them wasn't on the market. So a third of the properties I ever bought in my life, one
We're
of
on the
them,
market.
what the third weren't on the market. Now that's kind of interesting. You're absolutely right. Is someone who's thinking about selling but they're not quite sure. If someone approaches them with an offer from a keen buyer, they might go, you know what? I mean, I never thought I'd live in the town that I live in until I saw the property prices in it, and I said, so it was like wasn't 12 months ago. Is that right? 12 months ago, this wasn't on the cards where I live. Now we've made the best move we've ever made. People are subject, they're responsive to the stimulus or the nudge that makes them do things because people are always thinking about the property. Is the reason why 96 million people visit Rightmove a month because everyone loves thinking about property.
Yeah, it's the most talked about subject in the UK after the weather, isn't it? Property
which is
prices and the property market.
which is very relevant with probably what you're. I mean, I'm more on the east side of the UK, but I think you might be getting a bit wet today over on the west side.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Well,
All good
stay
fun.
safe, everyone, on that front because there's a
So
weather
that's
warning.
my advice for
Yeah,
homeowners. For
landlords.
landlords, yes. So for landlords, get a. So we offer something called a health check, or we've got another service we offer as well called a portfolio review. So either is available, but um, review your portfolio. Whether you've got one property, five properties, 10 properties, 100 properties, basically speak to a professional. So we offer this service where we'll sit down with you and we will go through everything. We'll look at what mortgage rates you're paying, what ownership structure you've got the property in, whether it's in a personal name or with a limited company. We'll look at all of your tenancy files, make sure they're all compliant, and also look at your rental income as well. And that's where we see the biggest sort of downfall, I think, for landlords at the moment is they're not charging enough rent, but also a lot of them haven't got their compliance in order as well. So there's over 170 pieces of legislation that landlords need to play by, basically, just to stay on the right side of the law. And there's quite a lot of common pitfalls we come across. So I think with more regulation coming into force next year and the actual Renters' Rights Act, funnily enough, does actually come into force on the 27th of December this year, because that's when the council get their enhanced powers. And basically, as of 27th of December, the local authority can walk into the location where all your tenancy files are. So whether that's in a home office or whether it's in a letting agent's office, and they can basically go through it all. And if there's something in there that isn't right, that's when the fines start. So although the actual implementation date is the 1st of May next year for the Renters' Rights Act, the first part of it comes into force on the 27th of December, literally just after Boxing Day. So for any landlords listening,
Merry Christmas,
I
everybody.
know, yeah. Merry Christmas. So, for any landlords listening to this right now, now has never been there's never been a better time to actually review your compliance, do a compliance audit. So, if anyone would like to take advantage of that, we do them free of charge. Book in
Right.
with us,
That
and
was
we'll
my question. What does it cost? So it's free of charge.
free of charge, free of charge,
If they're your clients or if they're not your clients.
both.
Wow. Okay. Again, think what you've got out of this podcast, folks. Free books, free portfolio tenancy health checks. It's kind of
Yeah.
like this is the gift that keeps on giving. Look,
Merry Christmas.
one final question, because the time of year. I've got to ask this question. Are you on the naughty list or the nice list? Have you been a naughty
Hey.
boy or a nice boy this year for Santa's list? I hear he's writing the list and he's checking it twice
Who is
to
it?
find out whether you've been naughty or nice.
So I've been. So I would say I've been good this year.
You're a
To be
good
fair.
boy.
Yeah, yeah. I've been helping a lot of people. And yeah, no, I don't think I've been naughty this year. Sorry.
Fantastic. Well, look, David, that was once again a really good conversation. I really enjoyed that. I hope it's been useful to everyone out there. If you've got
Thanks for
any
listening.
questions, David is, as you can see, a completely open book and has a book. Give him a shout, send him that email, get your free book, do those health checks. And in the meantime, have a wonderful Christmas with family and friends. And we'll see you on the other side in 2026. Take
Thanks for
care.
listening.